views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Open Tuesday, a weekly program providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, and today is Tuesday, May 4th. Coming up, we'll learn about the Black Opportunities Movement, Black Lives Matter Greater New York's policy work to advance solutions and build strong Black communities. Then, the Empire Whole Health Report is back. This month, we discuss COVID-19 vaccines and vaccine equity and hesitancy in the Bronx. After that, we'll learn about Compassion, a Bronx-based organization focused on the holistic well-being of youth and young adults. And May is Stroke Awareness Month. Learn why catching strokes early is important even in a pandemic and more with our Montefiore expert. So please stick around. Open BXRX starts now. Welcome to Open Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. Black Lives Matter Greater New York has expanded their activism with the Black Opportunities Movement, aka Black Ops, a policy platform supported by the Black Act, a local, state, and federal policy framework to advance solutions and build strong Black communities. Joining us now to share more is Chivona Newsome, the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Greater New York and the Black Opportunities Movement. Chivona, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure having you here.
Likewise, I'm happy to be back. Hello, everyone in the Bronx.
Yes. Thank you for always showing love and coming back to where Black Lives Matter Greater New York started, the X. So before we start, Chivona, can you tell us more about the Black Ops movement for folks who are not familiar?
I want to give you guys a small history of it. So, we've been operating as Black Lives Matter Greater New York for the last about 5 years. When George Floyd died, our world shifted. The whole world shifted. But as leaders, we always have to be thinking about the next steps. So we went out to Minneapolis the first 48 hours. And when we got back, instead of just taking to the streets as everyone else did for months and months, we did a think tank. We literally, the whole team, locked ourselves in to one of our members' homes and we wrote policy. And we announced those policies going on a year ago on June 7th. So coming out of that is more than policy, it's about mutual aid. The real part of it is because we see here in the Bronx, as we can see around the world, no one's coming to save us. So this program has expanded to Atlanta, Georgia, and Houston, Texas. What we'll be covering today is the policy, but it's going to be Black economics. It's going to be helping each other. And it's also going to be a little bit of policing our communities as the Black Panther Party did to ensure our safety.
Right. And Chivona, your most recent law enforcement reform policy in the Black Act is actually titled the Blue Wall Law. What exactly is it? Can you help us break it down?
Absolutely. And it's short and simple. The same way if I went and applied for some kind of government aid or if I wrote on my tax forms wrong, I can be liable. I can go to jail. So the Blue Wall Law is geared at breaking down that blue wall of silence. As we know, the NYPD and other law enforcement, they operate as a gang. They have a strict no snitch policy, which is similar to that of La Costa Nostra or stronger than any cartel that we could possibly name in this segment. So what we're going to do is, what we're pushing for is for officers who falsify police documents will be prosecuted and imprisoned for 1.5 to 3 years. So pretty much they lie in reports. It happens. As we see, we just had a win. This was a very small case. Ryan Wilson, he hung himself. This just came out in the Daily News yesterday, about a week ago. Sorry, it came out about a week ago in the Daily News. Ryan Wilson hung himself in Manhattan, the Tombs, as we know it in the Bronx. He hung himself in the Tombs, and the inmates were crying out for help. Help him, help him. An officer came, looked, said, oh, he's just playing around while he's literally hanging. And then the captain, who was just indicted a week ago, she falsified the reports. So now she is being charged with negligent homicide and falsifying police reports. So we just want to do that across the board. And not only for NYPD, because they are the third most funded military in the world, but the things we do here in New York, the laws that we get passed on a state and local level, they change the whole country, as we see an ending qualified immunity is spread to Mexico and other parts of the nation.
Right. And thank you, Chivona, for giving us that background. And as your organization, Black Lives Matter Greater New York, also advocated for several other pieces of legislation, as we know, including the repeal of 50A. Can you share those other laws with us and also emphasize what the 50A is as well for the
Not a
folks?
problem. And I'll start with 58. That is releasing police's misconduct, meaning if they harm someone, if they have a history of police brutality, those records used to be sealed. Imagine your job hiding everything you do in a possible lawsuit. So now police misconduct records are available to the public. That's the first thing we got passed. This came out in the Say Her Name Act, early June last 2020. Governor Cuomo signed an executive order for our bills. Most of our legislation, to be honest, it doesn't come through the politicians who the police unions fund their political campaign. It's usually signed off with an executive order. The next one, if your audience goes to the website, Black Opportunities, the first bill we have is the I Can't Breathe Act. That was actually passed under the Andrew Kearse Act, who was a man we worked with his family. The police allowed him for 17 minutes to call out, I can't breathe, and he died in the back of a police car. Next, the chokehold ban is something we also got passed, which has been banned in most police handbooks for years, but as we've seen with Eric Gardner, that isn't so. So that's a strong law. Next, we got introduced in the last month, the Elected Civilian Complaint Review Board, because police brutality needs to be properly investigated and officers need to be prosecuted. So finger crossed that one happens. Qualified immunity. I know I'm giving you guys a lot in a little bit of time, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. Qualified immunity means if an officer harms, kills you or your family, you can sue him. You will own that home, those little boats they like to buy. He will lose his pension. So our New York City Council has also ended that. So those are and lastly, a special prosecutor. We've seen an AG, Letitia James, say that the police brutality of the past year, the past summer, how we were getting beat up. I've been personally beaten with batons by law enforcement. Those will be investigated by a special prosecutor, because anyone in the Bronx knows the DA's office works very, very close with law enforcement. So how could there be unbiased in the prosecution of these officers?
Right. And Chivona, that's referring to the June 4th protest here in the Bronx, no?
Yeah, right on. And my neighbors, like I'm in the Bronx today, my neighbors who are scientists and engineers, they took to the streets. They were beaten and kettled in, like we've all seen those videos. So that's just to protect everybody in the community who's taking the stand. And the Bronx has been going hard for a very long time against injustice.
Right. And Chivona, you mentioned community policing. Does Black Ops eventually seek to replace current law enforcement and the NYPD?
Actually, Black Ops, we are abolitionists. With our tactical team and the people who are going to be policing, we will not directly be policing in such a large amount. It would be more of community policing for us, but we do need to dismantle the police force because clearly it isn't working. Crime is going up. It continues to go up. And what people need to know in the Bronx is when you hear about gun control is racist. It became an issue once Black people became armed. If you want to stop the murder in your community, the robbery and crimes of opportunity, let me give you guys a little bit of facts. Communities that have the highest rates of murder have the highest rates of unemployment. So if our government wanted to stop crime, they would invest in our community. And that's what abolishing the police is. That means having mental health workers. Because let's be real, living in trauma and poverty, it causes something to happen to our psyches. In addition to people who are plagued with other mental illnesses, that means having social workers in school. Most of the things that police respond to are not crimes that someone carrying a gun would need to do. We need a holistic approach. So when I scream defund the police or abolish police, I know that if I close every precinct tomorrow, that wouldn't stop the current state we are living in. We have to do a complete holistic approach, the same way that the system has had a holistic approach in oppressing us.
And if you can break that down, Chivona, what will community control and the community protecting itself look like down the line? What will it mean for Bronxites in particular?
This is going to be a challenge. Bronxites have to step up. You have to make a conscious decision to know that enough is enough. And the worst thing they did to us was telling us that we didn't have power. You see it in other communities where they have their own ambulances, they have their own schools, and they have their own police force. So that would mean community policing, taking an active role in your community. And right now, gun laws are being challenged. New York State gun laws are being challenged in the last week and a half or so for New York State specifically. But in states where you are licensed to carry, as I am licensed to carry in most states, in many states, about 30, our Black ops people will patrol the community with guns. And I know that sounds a little harsh, but it worked quite well for the Black Panther Party. My tactical trainer uses this scenario because you're like, people are going to have guns against the cops. America and China don't really have a problem because they're equally armed and it allows them to come to a peaceful resolution. Right now, we are powerless. Black people are disproportionately affected by police brutality. And if we had people in our community who took a stand and say, no, in the case of George Floyd, I have a gun too. You are not going to put your knee on the neck of George Floyd, or who could step in for Eric Garner, we'd see a difference in the way the police handled us.
And Siobhan, I have to ask you, what were your thoughts during the Derek Chauvin case, the verdict? Do you feel like it's accountability? What's your feeling?
Okay, see, I'm going to be to the far left of what the activists are saying, because I look at this, we study art of war in our teachings at Black Ops. We study war strategies, and we're a very strategic activist group. That's why you see so many pieces of legislation. That's how you see how we work media and spread messaging. So I took George Floyd's murder, which was when we got the verdict about roughly 2 weeks ago, I took it as a joy. I rejoice because being an activist for so long, victories don't come often. Now, was I delusional to think that victory would end systemic oppression and police brutality? No, but we just accomplished the impossible. And what I mean by the impossible is, in the last 6 years, since 2015, 16,000 people have been murdered by law enforcement nationally. Only 8 people have been convicted, and not on all counts. So anyone like the Bronxites who went out to Mont Haven and protested on June 4th, to every single person who put up any post on their social media, celebrate this victory, and it should start a fire in you to keep going. Now that I know I can accomplish that, the other 20 pieces of legislation and eradicating poverty, I know that we can change those too. So I was very happy about the verdict of Chavin.
Right. And before we go, Chivona, how can people learn more about Black Ops and read the Black Act? I'll also just stay in touch with the movement.
Right on. Blackopportunities.com. It's pretty cut and dry. It has every single act. Follow BLMGNY on social media, and I'm at New York Bonnie. And our thing is about educating our people. Yes, we fight for our people, but they have to know about the laws that get passed so they can hold elected officials accountable. Maybe it'll inspire more people to run for city council and local office. We have to be accountable and do the research. I know that it's a lot in this COVID era. That's why we're calling for cancel the rent in the Black Act. It's a lot to ingest and to take in, but you have to be conscious. We have to get informed. And that's the only way our people in the Bronx can overcome. Like the days of us being last and being beaten and shackled by poverty and oppression are gone. Everyone we have to keep fighting.
Thank you so much, Chivona, for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Likewise. I love you guys. Have a great one.
Chivona Newsome is the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Greater New York and the Black Opportunities Movement. We'll be right back here on Open BXRX Tuesday.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet, this is Hersh. Welcome back. This week, the Whole Health Report, sponsored by Empire BlueCross BlueShield, is back with Dr. Craig Hersh, the Chief Medical Officer at Empire. We're joined by two special guests, the Reverend Dr. Bruce Rivera, President of the Bronx Multi-Faith Advisory Group, and the Bronx Borough President's Director of Health and Human Services, Dr. Nancy Kheck. We will be talking about COVID vaccines today. Welcome, Dr. Hersh, Dr. Rivera, and Dr. Kheck. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Hello, Sonyi. How are you?
Doing well.
To set the stage for today's segment, as you know, Empire's mission is to materially and measurably improve the health of all New Yorkers. And to that end, when it comes to COVID vaccines, there's definitely inequities here in the boroughs, and the Bronx is at the low end of the vaccine immunization scale right now, and they face some unique challenges in the Bronx. And what we're hoping to do today is to increase awareness, dispel myths, and help people overcome barriers so that we can increase those vaccination rates in the Bronx. And to that end, both Dr. Kheck and Dr. Rivera are here to provide additional information.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hersh. And this is definitely an important topic to discuss. We thank you all for joining us. I have read reports that there were issues getting the vaccine distributed equitably. Dr. Rivera, I know you helped found the Angel Brigade to improve access to the vaccine within Black and Brown communities in the Bronx and Washington Heights. How did that get started?
Martin Luther King Jr. once stated that all forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane because it often results in physical death. And in keeping with the tradition of the civil rights movement of the 1960s, we have examined and scrutinized the government's involvement in providing or not vaccine equity, particularly to our Black and Brown communities. So we immediately found out that the vaccine rollout was hampered by a number of key systemic deficiencies that were not fair and equitable towards the people who would need help the most. Early data had already supported the fact that certain zip codes in the South Bronx had the highest incidences of COVID infections, COVID hospitalizations, and COVID-related deaths in New York City. So you would think that the folks in these zip codes would have been targeted first. Unfortunately, the very next day of the vaccine rollout, appointments for locations citywide were full and people started to complain that there were no vacancies for weeks. And true to form, the city of New York was ill prepared to address these problems immediately. So others took advantage of this disparity. And many who knew how to navigate the system went to the front of the lines. People who were computer savvy, people who had family members with digital access, people who did not live in the 5 boroughs, and people who were primarily white from the suburbs of Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, and Rockland counties. Fort Washington Armory, under the auspices of Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, had initially opened its door for vaccination without setting aside appointments for the very people who lived in Washington Heights, and without providing availability of Spanish interpreters in one of the largest Spanish-speaking communities in New York City. Unheard of. So the Angel Brigade was an outgrowth of the Bronx Multi-Faith Advisory Group's attempt to help close the gap by putting together a volunteer task force made up of congregants from 40 churches, 8 mosques, 4 synagogues, 1 Hindi and Buddhist temple that would provide vaccine appointment assistance, transportation to vaccine locations, and language interpreters to improve vaccine access in the Bronx and in Washington Heights. I shift now to highlight how we successfully use this information to guide our efforts at lobbying our Bronx elected to unite and rally around the issue of vaccine equity, and subsequently sent a letter to the governor and mayor dated February 25th, 2021, advocating for increased access to vaccinations on par with the FEMA New York State sites, which had been opened in Brooklyn and Queens. This served as the catalyst in increasing the number of vaccines at Yankee Stadium, particularly for the residents of the Bronx, and the opening of 2 locations in the North Bronx and Co-op City that predominantly serves our aging population. So we are happy that the Bronx elected showed a unified front to highlight the disparities that were existing in our Bronx community and how they could be corrected to the benefit of all Bronxites. I yield the floor back.
Thank you so much for sharing, Reverend Dr. Rivera. And Dr. Kheck, there's a lot of work happening at the Bronx Borough President's Office as well. Can you tell us what the borough has done to address issues with access here in the Bronx?
I want to thank Dr. Rivera for pointing out all the issues regarding access and the equity initiative put out by the city. He proved something important in that it takes an investment in human capital, in working with partners, people, community, and faith-based organizations to really know what's happening in communities, where the need is, where there is the greatest digital divide and the lack of information and access. And we have worked extensively with community partners as well as partners from the city to try to penetrate into those areas where there's the highest need and where individuals perhaps were not able to access even the use of a computer or a smartphone. And our office wound up developing a multi-pronged approach. We have our entire constituent affairs division and our IT division and our health and policy division that really work together to provide access, sometimes even on an individual basis where people, needed help. And that a lot of the work that we did was with partners that really helped us first get out and do testing. And once the city wound up providing data on a regular basis, we were able to really look where there were surging numbers of COVID infections and to deploy mobile units to go out and test and to really promote leafleting, public outreach, tabling, and access into communities like in NYCHA housing, where it was very difficult to access there and to get mobile units in. That is what's been happening for us. All along, I think the importance is collaboration and being able to leverage donations and communication with those individuals, churches, and some of our most important community partners that are really invested for decades in both communication and trust with people on the ground. And, the borough president has been in every corner of the Bronx throughout the entire pandemic. And we've learned a lot. You see on the ground, you see what's really there. And we are grateful for the work that you've done, Dr. Rivera. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kheck. So we have 4 minutes left, and we do have a lot of information to catch up our viewers with. But I wanted to ask about disinformation and misconceptions on the COVID vaccines. What is the message we want to be spreading, and what should our audience know?
I think people need to get information from trusted sources, not from social media. There's a couple of key points. I'll be very brief. One, there are very dangerous variants of coronavirus that are circulating in the city They spread easily and they're more damaging than ever. Vaccination equals protection. If you get in contact with the virus and you've been vaccinated, your body will fight that off and it will not spread into all of your organ systems. Unvaccinated people don't have that defense mechanism, and they can not only then become ill and potentially die themselves, but also spread that to many others. Importantly, people who've had COVID often have a false sense of security that they do not need to get vaccinated. Absolutely, you do. Many young people, healthy people, who've had very mild infections are now reporting long-term COVID symptoms that come and go, that affect brain, heart, lungs, digestive system, sleep, and they really destroy quality of life. Those young people, here in the Bronx in particular, are the least vaccinated in the entire city, between 18 and 34-year-olds. We want those people to get vaccinated. That's really crucial. And, you know, every Bronxite should know, after 1 year of lived experience, that we had at the beginning of the pandemic, like 900 people a day were dying. Now in the Bronx, on average, it's 3 or 4, and even that is too much. Getting vaccinated matters.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kheck, for helping us break that down for our viewers. I think there's also some misinformation out there on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as well. What can you tell us about the safety and effectiveness of this shot?
You know, that is a very traditional vaccine. It's an old school vaccine that resembles that same mechanism that they used to make J&J, and also the vaccine that I took, the AstraZeneca, has been around for like 20 plus years. There's a lot of attention now to a very, very, very remote and rare possible side effect. And I always tell people, you know, the numbers that the CDC talks about in millions doesn't always make sense to the average citizen, a lay person. And I always say, think about if every single person in the Bronx were vaccinated with J&J, the possibility that any person would have a side effect, it would be one person out of the entire, you know, group. And so it's such a remote and small possibility. It's mostly women who are between a certain age group. And, you know, our national leaders, the experts, decided that the benefits significantly outweigh the risk because it's so tiny. It really saves lives, particularly in communities that need access for homebound individuals and for people that work 3 jobs or can't make it to a vaccine site that is remote and far away. It really helps.
And Dr. Rivera, what role have you played in educating the community the way we're doing right now on this show?
What I would like our viewers to understand is that faith-based institutions speak to more people on their Sabbath day than any other institution in America combined. So in essence, we have the platform to get critical public health information out in the least amount of time that is generally received by our constituency with trust and hope beyond that which could be provided by the government and health officials. In moments such as this pandemic, the community turns to their houses of worship to be the clearinghouse of reliable information that will guide their actions on how they will proceed with dealing with COVID. Many of our clergy have led by example and have been tested and vaccinated to help bolster attitudes toward accepting the vaccination as the best path to combat this pandemic. And as you can see, I am one of them. We have opened our doors for COVID-19 testing, provided food and clothing to those who are food insecure and feeling the social effects of COVID, while some have been used as vaccine pop-up sites. The Bronx Multi-Faith Advisory Group have used our monthly meetings to educate our participants with current and critical updates regarding SARS-CoV-2 and have hosted timely workshops on how to deal with heightened disinterest and vaccine hesitancy. I turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kheck, Dr. Rivera, and Dr. Hersh for your time today. I wish we had more time, but we do want to keep our viewers informed. Where can they go to find out more information and get help?
So there are a couple of different places. Clearly, you can go to our homepage, empireblue.com. You can go to the Vaccine Command Center, or you can call the COVID-19 hotline. The numbers are on the page right here in front of you.
Thank you so much again. Dr. Hersh, Dr. Kheck, and Dr. Rivera, we need like a forum of some sort so that we can talk a little more in depth about these important topics, but thank you.
Thank you.
That was again an important discussion to have. Dr. Hersh, we look forward to having you back soon with the Whole Health Report from Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield. We are taking a quick break here on Open BXRX Tuesday. We will be right back. Welcome back. Our next guest is particularly interested in the holistic well-being of Bronx youth and young adults. Through Compassion, her Bronx service-based organization, she has committed to implementing health curricula and best practices for youth and young adults. Joining us now to share more is Caroline D. Davis, CEO and founder of Compassion. Welcome, Caroline. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So to start it off, for anyone who's not familiar, can you tell us about Compassion and your mission?
Absolutely. So Compassion is a service-based MWBE, Minority Woman Business Enterprise Organization. And it's all about providing services to youth and their families here in the Bronx to make sure that we have the conversation about sexual health, to make sure we have the conversation about what does it mean to not be number 62, and really just giving them a platform to really be honest and open and raw, which unfortunately is not, something that's always provided for them.
Thank you so much for sharing, Caroline. And how have you been able to provide services throughout the pandemic? A lot of things have changed this past year.
Absolutely. So we are definitely face-to-face, hands-on. And so we totally have had to, go virtual, very much like everyone else. So a lot of our sessions have been through Zoom. We have consulting, the Good Shepherd Services BRAG program, Bronx Rise Against Gun Violence. We consult for all their therapeutic sessions. And so we do that every Wednesday through a Zoom. We've been able to have guest speakers come in, like from New York City Smoke Free and Bronx Reality Check. Those are some of our partners. So pretty much like the rest of the world, we've been operating virtually. And thank God it's still been successful.
Wow, that's incredible to hear. And a lot of the youth is still participating in these important programs. That's something that we should keep doing, engaging our youth in programming, especially because of how much lockdown they'd have to endure this past year. Yeah. Caroline, as you mentioned, your organization is youth focused. A quote on your website stood out to me. It read, "The youth are not our future, but our now." Can you tell us about this statement and why you felt inclined to provide these resources to youth, especially in the Bronx?
I am a Bronx girl, truly from the Bronx, grew up in Castle Hill Projects. So I know what it means to have to apply for summer youth employment. I know what it means to, be in a single parent home. And one of the things that was instilled in me, and I'm so proud of my upbringing here in the Bronx, are the tools and resources, right? Those are the things that have built me into being the woman that I am today. Those are the individuals that, the grownups that were in my life at that time brought me to the place that I am today. But it was because they focused on the gifts and the power that I had as a young person. And I believe that's something that we as adults need to take more accountability of, and making sure that we are preparing youth now. They are creative now. They are intelligent now. They have power now. And it's just so important that we make sure that they're prepared to run the world in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. And can you share more about your Compassion Bronx Voices project? What exactly is it, and who can participate and how?
Absolutely. So Bronx Voices is another consulting project that we have with CUNY School of Medicine and Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital. And all the researchers are Black and brown women. And they specifically wanted to focus on what has been the experience of Bronx parents and their teens in the midst of this pandemic. And in doing so, this is a virtual focus group. It's 3 sessions for parents, 3 sessions for teens, and it's in English, it's in Spanish. And once parents and teens complete the actual 3 sessions, they get Amazon gift cards virtually. So if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out and utilize the information that's being provided. We definitely want to just focus on just having an open space for young men to freely talk as well as work out. And so we had a 6-week program where young men were able to basically kick rhymes with Randy Mason, who is an amazing hip hop artist right here from the Bronx. And then right after that, they had a fitness session with a retired NYPD police officer, Kenny Kissadoo, who's now a certified personal trainer. And we're hoping that the Department of Health, the Bronx Neighborhood Action Center, will provide funding again. That was how we were able to host and facilitate the 6 weeks program, which was also virtual.
Got it. And as you said, the last event happened last week, but if there's a young man out there that wants to inquire about future programming, how can they stay in touch and find out more?
We definitely encourage young people to reach out to us year-wide. Our office doesn't close. We are available to give resources, and we do have some upcoming things that we might be doing with the Allen Houston Foundation. There will be other opportunities, especially as the summer comes about, and we definitely will make sure to bring in, young men, young women, LGBTQ youth, whoever you are. We want you to know that we're available to share our compassion.
I also want to share that Compassion provides internship and volunteer opportunities for the youth. Caroline, can you share more about this and how people can also inquire about these opportunities? We had the numbers on the screen, but if you can also state them for our viewers.
Absolutely. I am a professor at Lehman College in the Health Sciences Department, and many of my students need internships to complete their undergraduate degree. And so we provide internship and volunteer opportunities for both college and high school students, really just making them see how the healthcare field needs them, and how population health and community health is something that needs to just have more conversation in our Black and brown communities. And so if you're interested in knowing more, you can definitely DM us on our Instagram page, which is COME.PAS, on Compass It On with the periods inside. And you can also email us, and that's at compassiton.com, or give a call to us at 347-507-5885.
Caroline, I wanted to emphasize just the importance of having youth services like yours during this time, especially in the Bronx. And, you as a Bronxite, why was it so important for you to continue providing these services?
I believe that, and I thank you for that question so much. It's really important that young people recognize that there are people that look like us that want to see them be successful in ways that are outside of, what success often is created like in a box, so to speak. We often have dreams of being celebrity status, whether it's a ball player or in the music field, and that's great. But there are successful people right here in the Bronx doing amazing things, and just to understand that success needs to be redefined when we look at especially what it means in healthcare, right? And part of that is having conversations about sexual health, having conversations about, why is asthma one of the huge health disparities here in the Bronx? So, mental health. We need to have these conversations with young people now so that they're not another statistic, and that we won't be talking about how the Bronx is number 62 10 years from today in health disparities.
Absolutely. And when we talk about the challenges that the youth, our Bronx youth in particular, encounter, what are some of those challenges and how has your organization helped them overcome those challenges?
Absolutely. So, huge challenge. Our young people encounter violence, right? And 2019 to 2024, Governor Cuomo put out a health prevention agenda. And for the very first time on that agenda was addressing violence. But violence has been, unfortunately, decades of trauma that's impacted our communities. And so that's something myself, at 6 years old, I went to my first funeral where my uncle was shot, and so these are things that we have to address and recognize that we suppress a lot of this, and then we often wonder why we're angry or why we're acting in such ways. It's because we did not have the platform to discuss what we were really experiencing. And so it is personal to me to make sure that there's a platform for our Black and brown youth, of course, all youth, but I'm a Black woman. So, and my friends are from the Bronx, look like me. And so what does it mean to have these conversations and not accept it as the norm? So that's really important to us at Compassion.
Yes, it's moving on from the trauma and healing together, right, Caroline? So that's so important in our communities, and to have that intergenerational conversation with each other, no matter the age, is so important. And that's why I thank you and your organization for leading these efforts and spearheading these efforts in our borough. So thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. I thank you so much, Sonyi, for this opportunity, and I look forward to coming back.
Of course, you are welcome anytime, Caroline. Before we go, again, how can people find out more about Compassion and stay connected for future programming?
Yes, please follow us. We definitely want to share all the resources we have. We're still looking for people to participate in many of the opportunities that we have with partners. So at COME, COME, period, pass, PASS, period, IT, period, ON. Follow us on Instagram. Definitely go to our website, compassidon.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave us a voicemail. We'll follow up as soon as we can. And we are here to give resources that we want to make sure the Bronx is not number 62 in the future.
Let's change that. Thank you so much, Caroline, for your time today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Of course. Caroline D. Davis is the CEO and founder of Compassion BX. She is also a Bronxite. We'll be right back here on Open BXRX Tuesday.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people. Avoid crowds. Stay home if you can. Wash your hands frequently. Learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
Welcome back. May is Stroke Awareness Month. According to experts, early in the pandemic, there were considerably less patients seeking care for strokes of all kinds, severe and mild. Joining us now to share why catching strokes early is important, even in a pandemic and more, is Dr. Daniel Labovitz, Chief of the Division of Vascular Neurology at Montefiore Medical Center, Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Welcome, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here, and I think we have an important message today. I'm delighted to be with you.
We absolutely do, and we thank you. First, Doctor, let's start with the basics. It is Stroke Awareness Month, as we mentioned. Can you help us define what a stroke is exactly?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. What is a stroke? So people have heard of heart attacks. That's where you get a blockage in an artery in the heart, and the heart hurts and fails. Stroke is similar. It's a blockage in a blood vessel in the head, but it's also more complicated because it's not just a blockage in a blood vessel in the head. Some strokes are caused by bursting of a blood vessel in the head. So you can have stroke from a blockage that causes lack of blood flow, or you can have stroke from bursting of a blood vessel and that causes bleeding. So I like to say my job is much harder than that of a cardiologist who just worries about blockages.
Shots fired at cardiologist, Doctor.
Let's get started.
What are the main risk factors for stroke, Doctor? Let's say someone is listening and they're concerned about possibly getting a stroke. What are some of those main risk factors that we should watch out for?
Yes, so everybody needs to know, and it may not be about you yourself. It might be about somebody who's sitting next to you or your mom, or so everybody knows, no matter how old they are, what the signs and symptoms of stroke are.
Mm-hmm.
So the number one symptom that we see is weakness on one side of the body. And that has to do with how the brain is organized. And typically when stroke symptoms occur, it affects one side, not both.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can cause numbness on one side of the body. That's less common. And there are a lot of things that cause numbness. But if you feel numbness in your face and your arm at the same time, yeah, that could be a stroke. You need to come in. And you can cause trouble speaking because you're having trouble expressing yourself clearly, your speech is slurred, or because you're having trouble thinking of words or having trouble understanding words, depending on where the stroke is. And different parts of the brain have different jobs. If the stroke is in a part of the brain that controls language, you might be speaking clearly, but saying words that don't make sense.
Mm.
Stroke can affect vision. So loss of vision on one side of space is a stroke sign, and that isn't often appreciated by the patient. Often it's somebody else who notices that they're having trouble, they bump into things. Patients will say they just feel like their vision is blurry.
Mm.
Those are key hallmark signs. Lastly, sudden, very severe headache could be a stroke. A headache, worst of your life, unlike anything you ever experienced, is a medical emergency until proven otherwise.
And Doctor, are these symptoms different for men and women?
So the symptoms are the same, but men and women experience life differently and express themselves differently. And we've noticed with heart attack that women have been less likely to get treated early than men. That this is a bias on the part of doctors and sometimes a bias on the part of the patient. It's like, I couldn't have a heart attack, I'm a woman. Well, stroke can affect everyone, men and women, and it's an equal opportunity disaster. We don't like people to have strokes, but when they do, whether you're a man or a woman, the number one job, if you think it might be a stroke, call 911 and get to the emergency department immediately. the thing about stroke that really matters and that a lot of people don't know is we can turn it around if you get in fast enough. But as the clock ticks along, our opportunity to try to make the stroke better and turn things around starts to fade. So we really, really, really want people to make a guess. If they think it's a stroke, not sure, maybe it's just one of those other things, call 911. You don't call your mom, you don't call your sister, you call 911. The ambulance will call us on the way. We will be waiting for you when you arrive.
And doctor, what types of stroke treatments does Montefiore's Comprehensive Center for Stroke Care provide for patients?
So we are, as a Joint Commission certified super duper comprehensive stroke center, capable of providing the full gamut of care, including experimental treatments for people who opt for that. We by far the biggest intervention that we do, the one that's most exciting for me as a stroke doctor, is when somebody comes in with a big blockage and a severe stroke, we can reach up into the head using a catheter that we put in the leg, feed a little tube up into the head, and pull the clot out. And the next day, the patient has gone from being unable to move one side and unable to speak to complaining that the coffee is cold and he didn't like breakfast. So that kind of turnaround we see from time to time. It's not a guarantee. Right. We give it our best, and we can more than double the chance of a good recovery with that treatment. In addition, for the past 20 years, we've been giving a clot buster called TPA. That has to be delivered within 4.5 hours of onset of symptoms. It's super fast treatment, and we are in a rush to do it, which is why you need to call 911 if you think you're having a stroke, because we'll give you a clot buster if we can. The clot buster breaks up the clot that's causing the blockage. And sometimes, yeah, same story. The patient says, "Oh, doctor, I feel better." Sometimes, though, this problem, as I said, isn't blockage, but bleeding. And there we have neurosurgeons who specialize in stroke. They can pull clots out of your head, but they can also remove hemorrhages. And sometimes, if the stroke is really severe, we have to do more surgery than that. These are things that are only available at a comprehensive stroke center. Other centers don't have it. They transfer patients to us to get that kind of care.
Right. Thank you, doctor. Now, according to the American Heart Association, strokes are the number 5 cause of death in the U.S. Doctor, why is it important to catch strokes early, and how has the pandemic affected this early detection?
Well, that's 2 big questions. Number 1, stroke, yeah, it's the 5th leading cause of death. And you might think, gosh, doctor, can't you do better? And I have to say, well, we used to be number 3. We have done better. And a big part of that is risk factor reduction. We are so much better at controlling blood pressure, and people are more aware now, and we're not doing it enough. But if you can keep your blood pressure down, if you can take care of your diabetes, if you take the pills your doctor prescribes, and if there's a problem with paying for them, get help, make sure you can get your pills, this risk of stroke is reduced by 70%. So, number 1, you don't want me as your doctor. Prevent the stroke. But if it happens, the thrombectomy treatment we do, the TPA treatment we do, saves lives. So I have an exciting job. The COVID pandemic was a catastrophe for all of us. And, taking care of COVID patients, I got COVID. It's no joke. So, first of all, COVID is a nasty, very nasty, bad bug. The vaccine, I got that too. Absolutely worth it. Do everything you can to get it as fast as you can. The vaccine is key. It made my arm sore and I had a fever for a day. I did not like the vaccine, but boy, you want it. You do not want to catch COVID because COVID can cause stroke. Now, I do have one more thing to say, and that is when the pandemic hit us, everybody was afraid to come to the hospital. And we had patients with bad strokes staying home. The number of patients who came in with stroke dropped by up to 40% during the peak pandemic time back in March and April 2020. Where were those stroke patients?
Wow.
The strokes were still happening. They were staying home and they weren't getting the care they needed. And we paid a very heavy price. It wasn't just the COVID, it was the lack of stroke care. And that affected people with heart attack too. People were afraid of the hospital. So here's the message. We figured COVID out. We have vaccines. We have procedures in the hospital. We will keep you safe.
And doctor, as a follow-up question regarding COVID, are viruses like COVID-19 associated with a higher risk of stroke? If so, how and why?
Yes, and COVID has caused so many problems. One of the things it can do when you have a severe infection is increase the chance of blood clots forming anywhere in the body. They can form in the veins and block drainage of blood from the leg. That can be very serious. Or they can form a blood clot in the heart. And that blood clot doesn't want to stay in the heart. It gets pumped out. And it could get pumped out to the head. Or the blood clot could form in an artery in the head. That will cause a stroke. So we saw some very severe strokes that were complications of a COVID virus infection. First thing is to avoid it, get your vaccine. Second thing is, if you get COVID, get treated. We have things we can do. Montefiore specializes in it. There's a lot more than just staying home and hydrating.
Thank you so much, Dr. Labovitz, for joining us. We've run out of time, but how can we find out more information and contact Montefiore's Comprehensive Center for Stroke Care and, just stay informed on stroke care?
Yes. So I think the best way to do it is start with our website. We are always eager to have inquiries. We answer stroke questions. We take care of anybody who's had a stroke, and we're eager to help. I want everybody to stay safe, and please don't be afraid. If you think it's a stroke, call 911.
Thank you so much, Dr. Labovitz, for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
That's all for our show today. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time here on Open BXRX Tuesday.